when it comes to that commercial side, because of SpaceX and a lot of these other commercial players, the costs going down to launch these things, the risk has gone down as well. That's why a company like ours can come out with basically, experimental technology that may not have been fully proven out in orbit to actually launch these things at a fairly large scale. That just allows us to actually go out and build a company that can actually do a lot of these hard things.
We should spend a little time talking about is just at the macro level, I think the cost and how more efficient it is and how you're able to do this today. And I applaud people like SpaceX and Elon Musk for what they did, because historically to launch a space shuttle in the atmosphere was like $1 million of gas. It's such a waste, and you couldn't really put a big payload out there. And, I think the genius of Elon Musk was, hey, why are we doing this? Why can't we lighten everything up? Why can't we reuse these rockets? Why can't we make it more efficient? And like we were sharing earlier, as a result, they have almost half the satellites in space in the last decade. And, I think because of that, my assumption is the cost has gone down so rapidly that people like yourself are saying, oh, I can launch these things and explore. I mean, do you think at a macro level, that's a true statement? Like that's because of SpaceX and others that the cost has gone down in a way that is creating more innovation in this space?
Absolutely. Because as you mentioned, like launching a satellite would be an endeavor that would cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And if you're just putting that investment in, you can't really risk losing it, which is why, you would always go for legacy equipment. You would go for legacy technology that's, been proven to work in space, and there would be very little innovation from one step to the other, unless if you have like $1 billion in your pocket. Now, when it comes to that commercial side, because of SpaceX and a lot of these other commercial players, the costs going down to launch these things, the risk has gone down as well. Barriers to entry are so less. That's why a company like ours can come out with basically, experimental technology that may not have been fully proven out in orbit to actually launch these things at a fairly large scale. That just allows us to actually go out and build a company that can actually do a lot of these hard things. Another layer on top of that is it's also creating a mindset of innovation around being really lean in the space industry, which I guess this industry is not very used to. And that's something that we've taken upon ourselves as well, where we're now manufacturing these sensors for 20 times less than what they usually cost in industry. And that, this new era that's coming up of just like low cost manufacture of space hardware is just basically changing the entire game, especially as Starship launches and all these other rocket players come into play.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I remember a few things as you were talking. I remember I was in Hawaii a number of years ago, and I saw one of the SpaceX arrays fly over, and it was low altitude. So at first I saw satellite, whoop-de-doo, but it seemed really bright. I'm like, oh, it's probably low. And then all of a sudden in the sky, 29, it was 30 of them I counted. And we were at this luau, and everyone stopped. Everyone's like, what the heck? And it was such a crazy thing to see. And my understanding is they'll launch them all. They all, will fly out of the rocket, and then they slowly start to spread out, and they slowly start to gain altitude. And so we're fortunate that we happen to see probably an early, I don't know what you call it. I'll call it a hatch. I don't know. There's probably a specific term, but kind of a treat to see something like that, because it just highlights where we are now in terms of space exploration. And the other one, I was fortunate, back to the cost, I was able to go down and visit this company called Relativity Space. The CEO and founder of this company was like in his mid-20s when I met him. And his vision at the time was to build a fully 3D printed rocket. He was only working on gas tank at the time. That's all it was. And he had these massive, I think it was one of the biggest 3D printing arms, I think, on the planet to build this gas tank. And now I think he just did his first full rocket launch a few months ago, which is fascinating. But he used to be Blue Origin, and Jeff Bezos just didn't want to spend any time on it. And so he went out and raised a whole bunch of money, and now he's getting after it like that. So it's just another example of so much inertia in this space. And a bunch of things aren't going to work like anytime you're innovating, but it's okay. I think overall, a bunch of these things will, and we will all benefit, from that. And so clearly, I think the fact that you're able to leverage this for these sensors and things you're building, like you said, fresh out of school, it's like, I'm going to go launch a rocket, Mom. I mean, what did you tell your parents? Did you think you were crazy?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think every time I talked about like building a company, even they would always be like, because I come from like an Indian background, and it's really drilled into us to be like, hey, go to school, get a degree, go work a 9 to 5, and then, slowly build a belt over time. So really, for at least, especially coming from my culture, I'm going on a very non-traditional route. So definitely scared them a lot. But yeah, now they're in it as well, so they're as excited as me to see these birds fly. So one just going up in October, then another one going up in January. So
That's really cool. My dad had one job. He worked at Boeing his whole life for 40 plus years. And so now at this point, I don't know. I'm not that old, but I've probably worked at 8 different companies now. And so my dad's like, and any great dad, he's like, whatever you want to do, son, just have fun and, enjoy it. But I'm sure a lot of times he just thinks it's the craziest thing because he would never in his wildest dreams decide to venture out in something crazy like that. So it's not for everybody.
Absolutely.
I always say that.